Psychology of women who seem perfect. 7 dangerous, dark signs. They're already manipulating you, and you don't even know it. And if a specific person came to mind the moment you heard that, if your brain produced a face before you consciously decided to think about it, stay with this video. Because what you're about to understand isn't going to make you angry. It's going to make you clear. And clear is the only thing that actually changes anything. Before we go into the 7 signs, I need to establish something. Because this video is about a specific psychological pattern, one that presents through a carefully constructed exterior of warmth, selflessness, and apparent perfection, and uses that exterior as a delivery system for control. This pattern exists in people of any gender, but this specific version, the particular architecture of it, the way it uses feminine social expectations as camouflage, presents differently, functions differently, is significantly harder to name because the tools it uses, kindness, sacrifice, gentleness, the appearance of never doing anything wrong, are the tools we've been taught to trust unconditionally. And that's exactly the point. The most effective manipulation never looks like manipulation. It looks like everything you were taught to be grateful for. It looks like love. It looks like someone who is simply better than everyone else at being good. Here is what this video is actually about: a specific behavioral architecture that 7 precise signs reveal. An architecture that only becomes visible once you know what you're looking for, and that, once named, cannot be unseen. You may have been in contact with this architecture for months, possibly years, and the 7 signs we're about to go through are the first time you've had a language for what you've been experiencing. Let's start with what seems perfect actually is, because perfection, when it's real, doesn't feel the way this feels. Genuine warmth doesn't leave you feeling subtly inadequate. Genuine selflessness doesn't leave you with an inexplicable sense of debt. Genuine kindness doesn't make you feel somewhere beneath the surface, like you're being managed. The seems perfect pattern is not about someone who simply has their life together. It's about someone who uses the appearance of having everything together as a psychological tool for positioning. In the same way the narcissist uses warmth and then withdrawal, the seems perfect architecture uses the sustained projection of flawlessness to establish a specific dynamic. One person who is always slightly less than enough, and one person who is always quietly, graciously above it. Not through arrogance, through composure, through the perfectly measured sigh when something isn't done right, through the help that arrives just before you would have asked, so you didn't ask, but you know you needed it and you know who provided it, through the grace with which they handle everything you struggle with, making your struggle feel like a reflection of something lacking in you, rather than simply a harder circumstance. That's not perfection, that's architecture. And the first thing you need to understand is that it was built deliberately, whether the person building it is fully aware of the blueprint or not. Here's the specific reason this pattern is so effective. It weaponizes virtue. Every single sign we're about to cover, every one of the 7, is a behavior that, on its surface, looks like something admirable. Selflessness, patience, reliability, emotional composure, supportiveness, sacrifice, dedication. These are the words the people inside this dynamic use to describe the person running it. Not because they're wrong, but because those words describe the costume, not the mechanism inside. And here's the part that takes the longest to accept. The mechanism doesn't require conscious malice to run. Some people who run this architecture are completely aware of every move. Others have been running it since childhood because it worked, because it produced safety, because it generated control in environments where they had none. And the pattern became so integrated that it now runs automatically. Cold, precise. Neither version is less dangerous. Both produce the same result. You in a dynamic you didn't choose. shaped by an architecture you were never shown the blueprints for, losing ground, energy, and sometimes your sense of self to something that looks from the outside like the most caring relationship you've ever been in. 7 signs. Every single one of them looks like a virtue. Every single one of them functions as a control mechanism. Starting with the one that's running right now in a relationship you're currently in, and that you've probably already given a pass because it looked too much like love to question. Sign number 1. The flawless presentation. She never seems to get it wrong. Not in a loud way, not in a way that announces itself, in a quiet, consistent way that you've probably never consciously tracked, but that your nervous system has been tracking the entire time. The home is always right. The response to a difficult situation is always measured. When you're struggling, she handles the equivalent without struggle. When you make an error, she notices, not with criticism, with the kind of gentle course correction that is somehow worse than criticism. Because criticism you can push back on. The gentle course correction from someone who never seems to need it, that you can only receive. Here is what the flawless presentation actually is, psychologically, underneath the surface. It is a comparison gap, deliberately maintained, carefully curated, perpetually just wide enough to keep you in a specific position. Always slightly reaching, always slightly behind, always slightly grateful for the grace with which she handles your falling short. And here's the thing about a comparison gap maintained by another person. You can't close it, not because you're not capable, because every time you approach it, it moves. She finds another area of quiet, visible excellence, another thing she does effortlessly that you do with effort, another reminder, never spoken, of where the levels sit in this dynamic. The flawless presentation is not confidence. It is a positioning tool, and the position it creates is one where you are always working towards something she has already arrived at. No cap, the most effective version of this sign never once makes you feel like you're being made to feel inadequate. It just leaves you feeling inadequate and calling it your fault. Sign number 2. The quiet martyrdom. She does more than her share. Always. And she does it without complaint. She doesn't say, "I do everything around here." She doesn't say, "Do you know how much I give up for this?" She says nothing. She simply keeps doing it. Quietly. Graciously. With the specific patience of someone who has decided to absorb the imbalance because she doesn't want to make it your problem. And here's what you feel. Not gratitude exactly. Something heavier than gratitude. Something closer to debt. An invisible, shapeless, uncomfortable sense of obligation that you can't trace to a specific conversation because there wasn't a specific conversation. There was just everything she did, and the quiet around it, and the subtle, unmistakable weight of all of it settling on you. The quiet martyrdom works because it never gives you anything to push back against. You can't say, "Stop making me feel guilty," because she never mentioned guilt. You can't say, "You're doing too much," because she'll immediately, graciously, tell you she's not, that she wants to, that she doesn't mind at all. And now you've raised it and been met with grace, and somehow you feel worse than before you said anything. The quiet martyrdom is a ledger system. Every sacrifice made, every late night, every favor, every piece of herself that she gave quietly is a credit. Not stated, not demanded, but present. And the debt on your side of the ledger is what controls your behavior in the relationship more effectively than any argument ever could. Because you'll do things, you'll absorb things, you'll stay in dynamics you should leave, not because you were told to, but because somewhere in your body, You feel like you owe. Before sign 3, because I want to ask you something. How many times have you felt something in a relationship? A quiet discomfort, an unnamed sense of being behind, of being indebted, of being managed, and then immediately questioned yourself. She's so good to me. What am I even sensing? I'm probably just insecure. This is clearly my issue, not hers. Drop a comment, just one of these. Sign 1, if the flawless presentation described something you felt but never named. Sign 2, if the quiet martyrdom described a debt you're currently carrying without knowing exactly why. Or both. Because in this pattern, they almost always travel together. Because the most isolating part of being inside this dynamic is that it's designed to make you question your own perception. Sign 3 specifically is built entirely on that self-doubt. And it's the one that most people spend the longest time inside, because it's the one that is most completely invisible until the moment it becomes undeniable. Sign 3, the one that your friends have never been able to explain to you when you've tried to describe it. The one where the clearest way to describe it is, I can't explain it, I just know something is off. This is why you couldn't explain it. Sign number 3, the sweetness shield. This is the one that makes this specific manipulation pattern so effective compared to everything we've covered on this channel before. With the narcissist, the control is visible once you know what to look for. The warmth rationing, the goalposts moving, the reactive abuse. These leave marks you can point at. The sweetness shield leaves nothing you can point at, because every act of aggression is wrapped so thoroughly in warmth, delivered so softly, so reasonably, so graciously, that calling it out doesn't just fail, it inverts the dynamic. It looks like this. You do something she disapproves of. She doesn't say she disapproves. She responds with increased sweetness, more care, more help, a small gift, a kind word at exactly the moment it would mean the most. And somewhere in your body, you feel the correction. Not in your head, in your body. The behavior produced a response. The response was positive, but something in the quality of it, something in the precision of it, tells you this was not organic. This was calibrated. And here's the trap of the sweetness shield. If you say that out loud, I feel like you're managing me right now. The response is confused hurt. Genuine seeming, possibly actual hurt. And now, you were the one who accused someone of manipulating you for being kind. You're the problem. You're the suspicious one, the ungrateful one, the one who takes kindness and sees something wrong with it. The sweetness shield is a perfect closed system, because the only defense against it, naming it, becomes evidence of a character flaw in you. And while you're processing whether you were wrong to say something, the correction has landed, the behavior has been addressed, the dynamic has been maintained. And she did it with a gift. Sign number 4. The emotional temperature control. She controls the emotional atmosphere of every room she's in, every relationship she's in. Not loudly, not through outbursts, through the specific social power of someone who is always the most emotionally composed person in the space, and who uses that composure not as a foundation for the people around them, but as a lever. When you need warmth, she is composed, cool, appropriate, not cold, just not warm, not enough to call out, not enough to say anything about, but noticeably, measurably less than what you needed. And when you have settled, when you have adjusted, when you have found a way to not need it, she provides it. Exactly then. And the warmth arriving precisely when you stopped reaching for it feels like the best thing, the relief, the thing that confirms the relationship is real, the thing that makes you think, see, I was wrong to feel that. And your nervous system just learned something. Don't need it, get it. Need it, don't get it. Don't express it, rewarded. Express it, nothing. This is operant conditioning running in a relationship without a visible hand on the controls. Because the hand on the controls is never visible. That's the entire design. The emotional temperature control has a secondary function that most people never recognize because it happens so gradually. You don't notice that over the course of months, sometimes years, you have stopped expressing certain emotional needs in this relationship. Not because they resolved, not because she addressed them, because you learned at the body level, not the mind level, that certain temperatures don't get met here. And now you carry those needs elsewhere, or suppress them, or find yourself not entirely sure why you feel something is missing in a relationship where, objectively, nothing is obviously wrong. Dead serious, the most effective control never announces itself. It just slowly removes the options you used to have access to. Sign number 5. The support that diminishes. She helps you. Genuinely. Usefully. Consistently. She's there when you need advice. She offers solutions before you fully articulated the problem. She anticipates what you need and provides it, often before you've asked. And you feel supported. You feel understood. You feel like someone who has the specific good fortune of having a person in your corner who actually gets it. Sign number 5. The support is never in the direction of your independence. The advice always arrives in a way that requires you to come back with the update. The solution always positions her as the person who knew, who saw clearly when you couldn't. The anticipation of your needs, however genuine, consistently reinforces the narrative of she understands you better than you understand yourself. And over time, you stop trusting your own read on certain situations. You find yourself running your thoughts past her before you fully sat with them. Not because you're weak, because the pattern has slowly established her as the more reliable narrator of your own experience. The support that diminishes is specifically designed, consciously or not, to keep you at a level where the support is necessary. If you grew past needing it, the dynamic would shift, the positioning would change, the leverage would disappear. So the help arrives in forms that solve the immediate problem, but leave the underlying uncertainty that produced it completely intact. You come back not because you're dependent in a simple way, because the support has been quietly structured around a version of you that always needs a little more than you currently have. Low-key, the most invisible control on this entire list, because it feels like the most genuine care. Sign number 6. The instant victim flip. This is the sign that most people encounter and never recover from in terms of trying to address the dynamic. Because the instant victim flip is the trap door that opens every single time you try to name any of the other 5. You address something, maybe not perfectly, maybe not calmly, maybe with some frustration in your voice because you've been sitting with it for a while. And the moment you do, the entire frame of the interaction reverses. You were the one who raised your voice. You were the one who accused. You were the one who made it hostile. She was just trying to help, just trying to be there for you, just trying to maintain something she values deeply. And look at how you're responding. And the specificity of this sign, the reason it's so effective, is that the flip is not a lie. The hurt is real. The vulnerability is genuine. The pain she's expressing is not performed. But the timing is impeccable. It arrives precisely at the moment you would otherwise gain some ground, at the moment your legitimate concern might be heard, at the moment the conversation was trending toward an honest reckoning. And suddenly, you're not addressing the dynamic anymore. You're managing the crisis of having upset her, which you feel guilty about, which you apologize for, which she graciously accepts, and the original concern is now behind you, unaddressed, absorbed, and slightly harder to raise again the next time, because you remember how it went the last time. The instant victim flip doesn't have to be deployed often to be effective. It only needs to happen once or twice with enough emotional intensity to train you to manage yourself before you speak, rather than managing what actually needs to be addressed. Right here, before sign 7, because sign 7, the last one, is the one that makes all 6 before it permanent. And before we get there, I want to ask something. Which of the first 6 just described something you've been trying to explain to someone close to you and they didn't get it? She seems so good to you, though. She's always been so nice whenever I've seen her. I mean, she does so much for you. Are you sure you're not just reading into it? Drop a comment. The number of the sign that you've specifically tried to explain and been met with, but she seems so perfect, though. Just the number. Because the reason people in this dynamic stay isolated with it is that the architecture is designed to be invisible to everyone outside it. The flawless presentation isn't just for you, it's for your entire social circle, which makes what I'm about to tell you about sign 7 the most important thing in this video. Because sign 7 is not about her. It's about what this dynamic has been doing to you, specifically to your sense of who you are, while all 6 other signs were running in the foreground. Sign number 7. The slow identity replacement. This one doesn't happen in a moment. It doesn't have a specific date. You can't point to the conversation where it began, because it didn't begin. It accumulated. Over the course of the relationship, whether that's months or years, a version of you has been slowly, systematically replaced by a version that works better for her architecture. The preferences you had that she consistently responded to with the subtle temperature drop, you don't express them anymore. The parts of yourself that the comparison gap quietly positioned as inadequate, you've been working on those. Adjusting, getting better at them, becoming the person who doesn't fall short in those areas anymore. Not because you chose to grow, because the dynamic quietly applied pressure to specific parts of you, and you adapted. The support that arrived every time you deferred to her read has made you defer to her read. The warmth that returned every time you stopped expressing certain needs has made you stop expressing them. The instant victim flip that appeared every time you tried to name something has made you manage yourself into silence. And the identity lock, trap 7 from the last video, has come for this one too. Because at some point, you stopped noticing the replacement as something happening to you. You just became the version, the quieter one, the less certain one, the one who checks with her, the one who has learned not to need certain things around her, the one who describes themselves in certain moments in terms of the dynamic rather than in terms of themselves. The slow identity replacement is the completion of the system. Traps 1 through 6 positioned you, made you uncertain, created comparison gaps, accumulated debt, trained your emotional expression, diminished your independent confidence, sealed off the confrontation exits. Sign 7 takes everything those 6 produced and makes you believe that's just who you are now. Not what was done to you, who you are. And that belief is the only thing keeping you in it. Here's why this specific architecture is more effective than almost anything we've discussed on this channel. And I want you to understand this completely because it also explains the exit. Every single sign in this video exploits something you were socialized to trust. Perfection, you were taught to admire and aspire to. Sacrifice, you were taught to honor and reciprocate. Kindness, you were taught to receive graciously and never question. Support, you were taught to be grateful for. Composure, you were taught to see as strength. Vulnerability, you were taught to protect and respond to. The 7 signs don't just target your individual psychology, they target the social programming that runs beneath your psychology. The values you absorbed before you had the capacity to audit them. Which means the fact that you didn't see this wasn't because you weren't smart enough. It wasn't because you were naive. It was because the architecture was built to look like the exact things you were always told to value. And here's the exit. The same exit from the last video. The same exit from all of them. The name. The specific names for the 7 signs remove the social camouflage. The flawless presentation is no longer just, she's so together. The quiet martyrdom is no longer just, she does so much for me. The sweetness shield is no longer just, she's so kind. The emotional temperature control is no longer just, she's very composed. The support that diminishes is no longer just, she really gets me. The instant victim flip is no longer just, I don't know how to bring things up with her. The slow identity replacement is no longer just, I've changed, I think she's good for me. Once the name exists, the costume falls off. And what was invisible becomes impossible to unsee. Not all at once, not without complexity, not without grief, because naming this in a relationship you've invested in is genuinely difficult, and that difficulty is real and deserves to be acknowledged. But the naming is still the exit. And now you have the names. 7 signs. One specific behavioral architecture, built from the tools you were always taught to trust. Sign 1. The flawless presentation. The comparison gap maintained deliberately, keeping you always slightly behind where she is. Sign 2. The quiet martyrdom. The ledger system that never announces itself, the debt that controls behavior more effectively than any argument. Sign 3. The sweetness shield. The aggression wrapped so thoroughly in warmth that naming it becomes evidence of a flaw in you. Sign 4. The emotional temperature control. The slow conditioning of what you express, the needs quietly removed from the relationship without a single conversation. Sign 5. The support that diminishes. The help structured around keeping you at a level where the help is always necessary. Sign 6. The instant victim flip. The trap door that closes every legitimate exit from the dynamic. Sign 7. The slow identity replacement. The completion of the system. The version of you that the architecture produced being mistaken for who you are. Not a personality. An architecture. An architecture built from virtues. And that is why it worked. And that is exactly why naming it changes everything.
Here's what I want you to sit with. Think about who you were at the beginning of this relationship. The specific version of yourself before the architecture was running. What you said freely that you no longer say. What you needed openly that you no longer express. What you believed about yourself before the comparison gap existed, before the debt was accumulated, before the temperature training took hold, before the exits were sealed. And then, think about who you are now in this dynamic, not in general, in this specific dynamic. The things you monitor, the things you no longer ask for, the person you've become around this specific person, and whether that version feels like growth or feels like accommodation. Growth expands you. Accommodation shrinks you. They can look identical from the outside. The difference lives in the body, in whether you feel more yourself or less yourself, in the presence of someone you've given a significant amount of yourself to. That answer, the honest one, is the only information you need. Not whether she's a bad person. Not whether she's doing it on purpose. Not whether you've misread everything. Just, in her presence, are you more yourself or less? That answer doesn't lie.
One thing before this video ends. If you're in a dynamic that this video described, the most important thing you can do right now is not make a decision, not a confrontation, not an exit, not a conversation. The most important thing you can do right now is simply notice. Start noticing which of the 7 signs you see in real time without acting on the noticing, without confronting, without changing anything yet. Just naming it internally when it arrives, what it is. Because the architecture runs on invisibility. The noticing alone begins to break it. Drop a comment, just the sign number that hit hardest, or the line from this video that you wish you'd had 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. Because someone watching this tonight is going to read your comment and finally have the language for something they've been carrying alone. In the next video, we're going to somewhere this series has been building towards since the beginning. Because we've covered what narcissists do, what dark triad people do, what overthinkers do, what this specific architecture does. We haven't covered the psychology of why certain people repeatedly find themselves in these specific dynamics. Not bad luck, not poor judgment, not something wrong with them. A specific psychological profile that was shaped before they had any say in it, that makes them the specific type of person these architectures were built for. If you've recognized yourself in more than one video on this channel, that video will be the most important one we've made, because it's the one that stops the cycle. Not by changing who you are, by understanding how you got here and choosing for the first time where you go next.